If you want to buy your first synth, there are a few things you have to consider before making your purchase, because you don't want to regret buying the wrong synth afterwards, right? There are three main types of synths you will encounter: the digital ones, the analog ones, and the combination of digital and analog, the hybrid ones. Each of these different categories have some pros and some cons, and let's start with the digital ones first. Digital synthesizers usually use digital oscillators, meaning they are basically using algorithm and computer chips to generate waveforms. They are not using real electricity to generate waveforms like it would be the case in analog synths, but this causes the oscillator to be very stable in tune, and most of the times you'll also have a lot more waveforms available, or just can create waveforms an analog oscillator couldn't create. But on the other side, these perfect in-tune oscillators can sound too perfect, or for some people even lifeless. And when we come to the analog section, this is going to be a little bit clearer, because an analog synth is using real electricity to generate waveforms with the help of oscillators, and this will result in slight pitch changes. So you have to tune an analog synth similar like a guitar, because if your analog synth is in a warm or cold environment, the oscillators can go out of tune, so you have to tune them like a real instrument, and these little pitch changes in little tuning imperfections result in this typical warm analog sound character. But on the other hand, they are not as stable in tune as a digital oscillator, and they offer less waveforms. And especially with analog vintage synths, you will find unique sound character even if it's the same synth model, because the internal components handling the electricity a little bit different because of the age. On the other hand, two vintage digital synths will probably sound the exact same. If we look at the hybrid synth models, we usually have the best of both worlds. We are using stable oscillators. Most of the time you will find digital oscillators in a hybrid synth, or for example the oscillators are analog but the filter is digital. There are a few combinations, but most of the time you will find digital oscillators for that stable pitch. But these hybrid synths will still give us character with analog circuits like a filter or envelopes. But on the other hand, it's not a true analog signal path, because there are some digital components inside. And to be honest, in my opinion, it's really just a thing of preference, and I can make a digital, hybrid or analog synth still sound good with the right sound design. Not every synth can play the same amount of notes, because there are different types of synths. For example, the monophonic synth, the paraphonic synth, and then we have the polyphonic synth. The monophonic synth can play only one note at a time, meaning it's not possible to play chords or something like this. These synths are usually really good for arpeggios, bass lines, or lead type sounds, but you wouldn't be able to play any chords with them. Most of the time, these synths are a little bit cheaper compared to paraphonic or polyphonic synth, because they are using way less components to create a sound. The paraphonic synth makes it possible for us to play multiple notes at a time, so we could play chords. All the notes you play are using the same signal path. You only have one signal path in the synth. That means they are sharing the same filter and the same envelopes. And this can sound a little bit strange if you want to play, for example, chords, because every time you will hit a new note, it will trigger the same filter over and over again. And if we look at the polyphonic synth, this even makes more sense. With a polyphonic synth, you can play multiple notes at a time, because polyphonic synth usually have multiple voices, meaning how many notes you can play. Some of them have 5 voices, some of them have 6 or 7 voices. This means how much notes you can play at the same time, meaning each note you are pressing is triggering an independent signal path, an independent filter, independent envelope, so you are not sharing these like in the paraphonic synth, and the notes will just sound more natural if you play it. This one is perfect if you want to play chords. Another big question you have to ask yourself is if you want a vintage synth or a modern day synth. The cool thing about vintage synths is they usually have a history behind them, offer a lot of more character because of old components inside the synth that are aging and sound slightly different, but they are way more expensive than modern day synths, and also hard to fix if they break down. Because for some of these old synths you usually won't find any spare parts, or it's just really hard to get a documentation and fix them yourself. And most of the time they offer less connectivity, meaning it's not that easy to connect with a DAW compared to the modern day synths. For modern day synths there are just way more resources, for example preset packs, documentation, ways or YouTube videos that show you how to fix them, and just in general a bunch of tutorials. In most cases, you will also find way more features on the modern day synths compared to the old ones. and compared to the vintage gear, it's just way more affordable, and they are way easier to fix and usually offer repair support from the manufacturer. Another thing you have to ask yourself is if you want to have an arpeggio, sequencer, or internal effects module. Not every synth is offering that, and if you want to have the power of performing with an ARP module or a sequencer, that's definitely something you should look out for. If you, for example, don't want to work with the DAW as a sequencer, that's really important. Most of the times you will find hybrid synths with a big effect section that is digital, so you have a completely analog signal path, but the effects path would be digital, so you still have the best of both worlds, a true analog sound path that you can achieve by just disabling the digital effects. I personally like synths with less effects that are focusing on a good sound quality rather than making it up with effects afterwards. And in my opinion, there are so many great digital effect plugins out there that you can use with way more flexibility instead of the internal effect section you will usually find on synths. If you don't have that much space, you can also consider a desktop synth. It's basically the same synth just without a keyboard. If you follow all these points, you can nicely filter out the perfect synth on your favorite retailer without making a wrong purchase. If you need help finding your first synth or want to build your own synth studio, you can book a one-on-one call with me where I help you to build your studio, help you with sound design or anything that comes to your mind. Thanks a lot for watching and see you soon.